Welcome back to Brojo Online. Today we're going to take a softer approach. We're going to talk about being kind to yourself. We're going to try and unpack what it means to love yourself. There's a lot out there about loving yourself, but in my opinion, it's mostly bullshit. You can't really apply it, or it doesn't really work, or it comes from people who don't understand it themselves. And so I wanted to put something out there that people can actually use to feel better about being with themselves. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at why people struggle with it, why nearly everybody seems to struggle with it, what causes it. We're going to look at its connection to concepts like stress, pressure, being not good enough, and living in a maladaptive society, living in a world that makes it harder to love yourself. And most importantly, and this will be near the end of the podcast, we're going to talk about practical solutions. We're going to talk about ways you can change your behavior, exercises, and practices you can engage in so that you like you more. Give a little backstory. This is something I've struggled with my whole life. Of all my values, I think acceptance is the one I struggle with the most. Acceptance is allowing what is to exist without trying to control it, letting go of control. I'm not a big fan of letting go of control, never have been. But being unable to let go of something that you cannot control and should not control is a massive cause of suffering. And when that thing is yourself, then we get self-loathing, or at least frustration with yourself. And that's something I've struggled with ever since I can remember. And partly it's because there's very little out there to help with this that is actually practically applicable in real life and actually works. There's a lot of platitudes out there, there's a lot of books about it, a lot of videos about it, but when you actually go to do it, nothing really changes for very long. It doesn't really deal with the complex problems of the human psyche. So people tend to, and this has been my case as well, either give up completely and think of that as self-care, have no standards, or, fluctuate between that and pressuring yourself to achieve highly. This kind of high, low, high, low. So procrastination followed by bursts of busyness and pressure, followed by more procrastination and giving up, going up and down this fucking roller coaster. I've been doing that my whole life. And this is what I see most people do. Most people don't seem to be able to cope. They use coping mechanisms. If you think of it this way, if you think that any of these things I'm about to list are a sign that a person has confidence problems, as in they have problems being kind to themselves and loving themselves, then you'll see how many people are struggling. So being busy, right? Doing more than you need to do. That's a coping mechanism. Alcohol, particularly in social situations. Any other kinds of drugs, gambling, porn, working really hard. Not to mention things like people pleasing, showing off, flitting from hobby to hobby or relationship to relationship, sexual addiction. All of these are signs of someone who's not content just being who they are. I mean, can you think of anyone who doesn't do any of those things? Probably not, right? So if you've ever wondered, are you the only one struggling with this? Nah. The rare ones are the ones who aren't. But over the last few years, especially since my daughter was born, I was forced into a position where I just could not achieve to the level I did previously. I was forced to accept that I was in reduced capacity due to sleep deprivation and parenting responsibilities. I realized I have to figure this out. I have to be okay with not impressing myself with new growth at every second. I have to be okay with not winning all the time. I have to be okay with being mediocre in my output, or otherwise I'm just going to suffer. See, previously, I'm kind of gifted and cursed. I'm a high performer and get a lot done. I can achieve well. I set my mind to something, it will be achieved. And sure, that's got plenty of upsides, but the downside is I expect that from myself, even when it's not possible. And that's where I really suffer, when I can't solve a problem. When it's not that I won't, but I can't. And becoming a father made me realize, I had to reprioritize. I just couldn't do it all anymore. I'd finally reached my capacity. I'd finally reached my limit. And yet I still punished myself for not exceeding that limit, and realized this punishment was serving nobody and just diminished my quality of life, that it was eating away at my self-confidence. And so I had to figure out a way. Now, I'm not saying I've perfected it, but I've definitely gotten onto something that works, and that's what I want to share with you guys today. I am going to cover the practicals at the end of this, but we need to unpack why it happens and what it is before the practical stuff makes sense. So I'm not trying to tease it out. It's just for that to actually be practical, you have to understand what's underneath it. But to sort of throw a bone early, being kind to yourself, loving yourself is essentially how you would treat somebody else if you loved them and you weren't judgmental and you wanted them to enjoy life with no agenda of your own. You just wanted what was best for them, and you just wanted them to have a good life. How would you talk to them? How would you encourage them or critique them? How would you support them? Well, being kind to yourself is just turning that inwards, doing all that to you as if you are a different person. Now, some of you can't do that yet because you have no frame of reference. You've never treated somebody else like that. You've never truly been helpful or generous or kind without like your own agenda, without trying to control them, without being, manipulative in the way you do it. Some of you might think taking care of someone else means making them into something that you prefer them to be, which isn't love at all, but control, manipulation. But most of you, well, maybe most of you, have had someone in your life that you are non-judgmental towards and that you just want the best for them, and their happiness makes you happy, like whatever makes them happy makes you happy kind of thing. Maybe it's a nephew or your own child, or maybe it's your best friend, somebody where you're just like, I don't need to control this person. I just want them to have a good life, and I'll do whatever I can to support that. And when they're down, you talk to them to try and like get them to see the strengths that they have and be more optimistic. And when they make mistakes, you try to ease them up on being hard on themselves and want them to just sort of like take the lesson and move on and so on. You've got that kind of attitude towards them. If you can do that with someone else, then this isn't a how-to practical problem, really. You know how to do it. You just have a double standard. You don't do it to yourself. Everybody else gets this loving treatment, or some other people get this loving treatment from you, but you don't get it from you. So the tools are there, but you're like a mechanic who has a shitty car in their garage. Like you fix everybody else's car, but your one rusts to pieces. And this double standard is ego. You think you deserve worse treatment. You're special, aren't you? So everybody else, you're compassionate and understanding and encouraging and tolerant of their humanity, but you, no, no, no tolerance for you. You've got to be perfect. You've got to do more. You've got to be better, more independent, higher success than these other people who you are kinder towards, who you're more tolerant of. So when you think you deserve harsher treatment than others, then you're saying you're special, and that's an ego thing. Even if it's negative, it's ego. You're still saying I'm significantly different to others. That's ego. Because you're fucking not. You're just another primate. Anything else you tell yourself is a bullshit story. One of the other practical things that we're about to dive into deeply is I think the best way to frame it is reduction of stress. Right? Stress is the definition of not enjoying life, isn't it? That's the word we give to the state of not enjoying life. Therefore, causing yourself stress is the opposite to kindness. And reducing stress must be, in some way, kindness. Right? So if you do anything to yourself that either immediately or delayed causes more stress, then that is unkind treatment of yourself. That is unloving. Right? We don't stress out the people we love. Or at least if we're doing that, then in that moment we're not being loving. So this is what I think is the easiest way to kind of grab onto this practically is stress. Is what I'm doing causing me more or less stress in the short term and the long run? Is it improving my quality of life mentally, psychologically, which is the only place that quality of life exists? Or is it reducing it? So being kind to yourself is anything that reduces or replaces stress with enjoyment, meaning, satisfaction, love. And not the instant gratification stuff like pleasure or sort of immediate highs, but more the longer term enjoyment and fulfillment in life. Anything that does moves from the stress end of the spectrum to the enjoyment and meaning end of the spectrum is an act of kindness, right? It's what you do to somebody else if you really cared about them and weren't judgmental and loved them. You try and remove them from the stress to the enjoyment side of life, right? Thank you for showing an interest in the Nice Guy Brotherhood, a group coaching community program for nice guys and people pleasers who want to become more confident and assertive to do better in their relationships and their careers. This is also for any man who wants to become more masculine, more bold, more honest, and more authentic. So in this program, we focus in on a lot of the people pleaser and approval seeking tendencies that hold men back from achieving full self-confidence and healthy relationships. Things like avoiding conflict, trying to fix other people's emotions, molding yourself to other people's preferences, failing to stand up for yourself, not going for what you really want, and not knowing who you really are. The goal, through the support of myself and the other members of the community, is to help you build the backbone to stand up for yourself, to stop caring what other people think of you, to stop getting lost in your thoughts and your feelings, and learn how to act decisively based on your own set of core values rather than what everybody else wants you to do. So we're looking to replace things like conflict avoidance and procrastination and trying to please others with going for what you really want based on who you really are. So we address all these issues through a number of methods. Firstly, we get together each week for a group session. Now, part of that is what's called hot seat coaching, which is somebody gets on the mic with me and we do a coaching session in front of the others, and everybody gives their feedback and support, and we can deal with specific issues that's coming up for that person in their life in relation to building confidence and overcoming nice guy syndrome. We also have group discussions during these calls. We share links and resources, feedback, questions, and everything we can do to support each other's growth. And then also, alongside these group calls, you get access to my full online library of self-development courses, which includes things like building rapport, setting boundaries, and learning to confront your fears. Now, if you're interested in the group, we have a deal where you get your first month for just $1 so that you can try it before you buy it and get a sense if it's really right for you and if these are the people that are going to help you achieve your goals. Once your first month is up, if you want to continue, then we have a monthly membership subscription. It's $250 US per month for full access to everything. This includes the entire archive of recordings from all the calls that we've had so far. And if you come along with a friend, both of you will get a 50% discount for joining together. There's what we call a zero risk guarantee. If at any time you're unsatisfied with the program, you can quit and you'll get your money from the last month given back to you, no questions asked. So come and check it out. If nothing else, for $1, you get access to everything for an entire month. No risk. I'll even return that dollar if you're not satisfied, because that's how confident I am that this program is going to change your life. We need to understand stress. So what is stress? Let's start from the beginning. And you can do this kind of research on your own if you like, but I'll give you the summary. Stress is essentially high cortisol levels. Okay, it's a neurochemical that goes through your body, and it floods your central nervous system in such a way that other chemicals like serotonin and dopamine have nowhere to go. You can't release the good feelings because you're packed full of bad feelings. And cortisol levels can remain elevated for a long period of time. For example, if you just moved house, it might take a full year for the cortisol level to really come back down just from the move, because changing that much in your life is stressful, right? Or grieving over a loved one. It might have been 5 years since they passed, but you still have elevated cortisol levels because you haven't processed the grief properly, perhaps, and you keep compounding it with other stressful things in your life, right? And that's what often happens is somebody has a externally stressful event like moving, losing a job, losing a partner, and then they also behave in a way that causes more stress, so they never come back down. They're miles away from their baseline cortisol levels. They've been elevated for so long that that's the water they swim in. They don't know any different. And I spent a lot of my life like that, where I was so stressed I didn't know I was stressed. It'd been so long, it was chronic stress. Bags under my eyes, man boobs, yelling at my computer every time it was slow to load. That was normal for me, right? It took me a long time to really realize like that's not normal. It was just normal for me. Stress manifests in lots of different ways. You can be irritable, agitated, worried, misery, hate, misanthropy, like hating people, finding people agitating, having a sense that you've got a string of bad luck, that you're overwhelmed, by things sort of stacking up on you, or that life is unfair. Maybe you're paranoid about how unfair life is, like you're getting a worse deal than others are. You think maybe something supernatural's happening, you're being targeted, you'll be exhausted. You might have what you think is depression, but you're actually just burned out. Those are quite often confused and even misdiagnosed, I think. You're really busy, you're hardly ever present, you always think about the past or the future, you're always worried about what's coming next, not enjoying what is now. You're restless and bored, got sleep problems, digestive problems, or you might have already been at this so long that you're having things like heart disease, stroke, dementia, the kind of longer term effects of chronic stress. But I think it's best summed up by Eckhart Tolle. He says, stress is being here when you want to be there. I can't imagine a simpler definition of stress than that, right? Like where you are is somewhere other than where you want to be. There is a gap between where you want to be and what it is, right? You're not the person you want to be someone else. You're not in the place you want to be somewhere else. You want to be doing something else, right? Do you want to have something else? As soon as you want anything more or different to what is, you enter into a state of stress, unless you can immediately fulfill that need. And most people can't. Or the things they want, the thing they're there that they're trying to get to, is no more satisfactory than where they are. They get there, they just want to be in another there. Becomes the new here, right? You see this with people making money all the time. If you can't be happy with 30 grand a year, you're not going to be happy with 300 grand a year or 3 million. Your mentality about not being happy here will go with you. It doesn't go away just because you get to the next destination. It's like a rainbow. It moves along as you move. You never catch up to the thing. Stress is a state of mind, not a state of your bank account. Stress is generally a reaction to things outside of your control, right? It's generally trying to control something that isn't quite going the way you want it to, or you just absolutely cannot control it and you're deluded for even trying. So you can be stressed about sort of trying to get that business deal. It feel like you've got it mostly under control, but it kind of depends on the other guy and your secretary got the notes wrong or whatever. You start to get stressed of these things that you can't control. Well, some of you get stressed about things that are obviously out of your control. The upcoming election results, global warming, the war in Israel, right? Things even with your best effort, working 24 hours a day, you could barely put a dent in them. Like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket, as one person once put it to me. So stress is always about this fixation on something outside of your control and wanting it to be something other than what it is. And then you get the physiological reactions to that wanting. And as I think I said earlier, I think of stress as the opposite of happiness. People think happiness is balanced out by sadness. I used to agree with Tim Ferriss. He said the opposite of happiness is to be bored. But I think boredom is just stress. I think it's a unnecessary word. We've already got a word for bored. It's stressed. It's being here when you want to be there. It's agitation of not being satisfied with what is. Whereas happiness, what is happiness? You don't want anything to change, isn't it? When you're happy, you want it exactly as it is, like what is currently happening meets your standards, meets your needs, is enjoyable, is meaningful. You wouldn't change a thing. That's happiness. And stress is the opposite. You don't want anything to stay the same, or at least you definitely want something to change. There's no such thing as being stressed about something you're satisfied with. That weird concept we call happiness, one way to look at it is the absence of stress. And that our whole life is really this kind of fluctuation between stress and happiness, between wanting to be somewhere else and being okay with where you are, acceptance and intolerance, battling between the two. So, coming back to the idea of self love or being kind to yourself, what you might even call the end result as happiness, is it's about trying to get to a place where you are cool with what is, including who you are, right here, right now, no changes required. As soon as a change of what is happening right now is required, you are entering into a state of stress. That gives you a sense of what being kind to yourself might look like. Now, there is probably an argument for a certain level of stress that is necessary. Like if we just sat around going, you know what, everything's fine all the time. I mean, when are we going to go to the toilet? When are we going to eat, right? A certain amount of motivation to adjust or grow in some way. But I think the real problem when it becomes stress is when it's something we can't control. When whatever the growth or change is We're asking more from ourselves than is currently possible, even if it seems possible in our head. But if it was, we wouldn't get stressed because we just do it. Right. So as soon as you want more from yourself, let's say you go do an exam and you get 97%. As soon as you think I should have got a 98%, you're entering into a state of stress. Now, if you go to the exam just thinking, oh, look, I'm just going to do my best on this exam with the knowledge I've got, and whatever happens, happens, that's still growth, but without stress. You're still pushing yourself to go and do something for your future and to, test yourself at the limits, but you're not asking more from yourself than you can actually deliver. Once you ask more from yourself or from life, you're into a state of stress, and there's really no benefit in that. All that does is undermine any happiness you might have now. It undermines any enjoyment of the process. And why would you want to stop enjoying the process? Isn't enjoying the process the most successful thing? If you always enjoy the process, how much growth are you going to do? If the process makes you miserable, how often are you going to give up and procrastinate and crash and relapse? People think that stress is helpful. I disagree entirely. Are you a nice guy or people pleaser who wishes they were more assertive, more honest, and better respected by others? Since 2013, I've been helping people just like you discover their integrity and apply it courageously to build deep and meaningful connections, get respected by others, and become the confident person you've always wanted to be. Imagine being able to speak your mind without worrying what other people will think or worrying that it's the right thing to say, and being able to assertively stand up for yourself and your loved ones. Imagine never feeling the need to apologize for who you are or what you want, and being able to live carefree without shame or the I'm not good enough story in your head. Imagine going to bed knowing that you courageously took every opportunity available to you and you've got no regrets because you always know what you should be doing in every situation. I'm so confident in my ability to help people like you unleash your highest level of self-worth that I give people a free coaching session to test what I'm doing. In this 1 hour session, we will uncover the biggest barrier to your confidence, whether it's an awareness problem, you don't know what you should be doing differently, or it's a courage problem, you know what you should be doing, but you find it too intimidating. I will guide you to make a breakthrough with your behavior to get through that barrier in a powerful way without feeling terrified and without destroying everything you love. I've had some people find this first session so powerful that I never hear from them again simply because they didn't need anything more after that. It launched them into the highest level of confidence that they've ever experienced. And if that's the result you get, I'm good with that. As one client put it, this session was more valuable to me than 3 years of therapy combined. So if you're tired of trying to keep everybody happy, and you're sick of worrying what other people think of you, and you're concerned that your people pleasing and conflict avoidance is going to damage your relationships, then come and have a talk with me. Worst case scenario, you get to experience what it's like to talk with someone who actually understands what it's like to be you. I've lived the nice guy experience for decades. I know it inside and out. I know that pain. Case scenario, and very likely, you will have such a powerful insight into a behavioral change that you can make in the next 24 hours to significantly improve your confidence, relationships, and career. All I ask is that you be honest, open to change, and willing to try something new. Why wait another 10 years to discover confidence when you can do it today? Fill out the brief form below to apply for a trial coaching session. Do this quickly because there are limited spots each month, and then I'll get back to you to book in a time to talk. So what causes stress? I think we've already touched on it, but I want to sum it up with an analogy from Stoicism. Talk about the cart, the dog that's tied to the cart. So you think of an old school, cart or chariot with wheels rolling slowly down a slope, and there's a dog tied to it with a rope. Now the dog's got a few choices. It can sort of struggle and strain against the rope and try to go somewhere other than where the cart's going. He can give up and lie down and get dragged ass behind the cart, or he can run alongside the cart within the rein of his rope and do what he can within that space. Those are basically his three options. Try to run away from the cart unsuccessfully, give up and get dragged, painful, or run with the cart and do what he can as he goes alongside the cart, right? Now, this is the Stoics' metaphor for fate. They basically say that you have a limited range of motion within fate, that there's a lot you can't control, and that as soon as you try to avoid going with this cart that's too heavy to move, it doesn't care about you, it doesn't even know you're there, you just end up suffering. You struggle or you get dragged. So stress is when you're struggling or getting dragged, whereas happiness is when you're running alongside the cart, making the most of the journey. Another metaphor I've used for this is thrashing in a chair. Let's say you duct tape me to this chair. I try to thrash against it. Now, it doesn't get me any more free, but it hurts to sit in the chair as I thrash. Whereas if I sit still, as if I chose to sit in the chair, then it's really no different having chosen to sit in the chair. Even if you've tied me up, I can act like I'm not tied up in a sense. And it is as enjoyable as just sitting on a chair by choice. Once I thrash against the ropes or the duct tape, I injure myself, but I'm still stuck in the chair. The cause of stress is trying to get beyond what you're capable of. I don't mean pushing and growing, because if you, let's say I go to the gym and do more push-ups than I usually do, those extra push-ups I was capable of because I did them. Stress is when I ask myself to do even more push-ups and I can't get off the ground. Now I'm stressed. I'm asking for this extra push-up that I don't have in me. For mental, physical, doesn't matter what reasons. I can't get off the ground this time, one more time. And by asking myself to do it one more time, I'm now stressed. I'm now pulling against the cart. And then if I keep doing that and I just give up and don't want to go to the gym anymore because I always feel like a failure when I go to the gym because I'm always a few push-ups short of what I'm capable of in my head, then I just don't go to the gym. I go sit home and I eat chips and watch TV and get fat again. And now I'm getting dragged behind the car. Now I'm going to have the misery of like not participating in life and just being pulled along by it. So when you're being dragged by the car or thrashing against it, that stress builds, and eventually you're going to want a relief from that stress and you're going to engage in coping behaviors, aren't you? You've got yours. What are they? Mine is sugar, binging, scrolling. Some people have drugs and alcohol. That used to be mine. Some people have casual sex, gambling, gaming. What's your thing? Busyness, eh? Work, exercising to the point of death. We've all got these things we do to try and feel better after the stress of thrashing against the chair or pulling against the rope. And we start to treat our body and our mind poorly with these coping mechanisms. And what do you think that does to our stress? Elevates the cortisol levels. So now we're in a pattern where our cure for the stress becomes the fucking cause. It's like if you smoke a cigarette to calm down. All you're doing is setting up the craving for the next cigarette. You actually just increased your baseline stress level, not decreased it. Yeah, the temporary illusion of relief, but now you want cigarettes even more. So now your whole baseline of stress has gone up. And you've also set yourself up that if you're feeling stressed later and you don't have cigarettes on you, now you're going to be even more stressed than somebody who just doesn't care about cigarettes. Another reason that we're going to go into in a bit more detail soon is anxiety. Anxiety is being afraid of something that doesn't exist or you can't control. And so you try to protect yourself from this threat that you can't protect yourself from, which means you just simulate nasty experiences in your head without being able to actually make any progress until you get burned out. And that can lead to stress, or that is stress in a way as well. Of course, trying to do too much, never being good enough, always setting that standard as +1 to what you actually did. So you're always falling short. So you constantly create this sense of failure, like no matter what you do, it was less than what you imagined doing. And you'll move the goalpost. I see this all the time in my own life, and I see it with other people, is they set a goal, and by the time they get there, they've reset the goal so that they don't achieve it. And then they're stressed out that they fail all the time, that they're always falling short. Quite often I see stress as being a combination of like external bad luck and then poor reactions that kind of generate or manufacture bad luck. So let's say a couple of things go wrong in a row, and bad luck tends to stack up. It doesn't spread evenly, does it? I think it follows chaos theory or something, that you have a good run and then you have a stack of things go wrong at once because life is random. It's not, structured in a on off type thing. So you have a little stack, you take a bit of a hit, you're not at your best, and then you react urgently or from a stressful place. You don't think things through, and then you cause three more problems for yourself, and now you got a real stack on your hand, and then you're sort of coping mechanisms and you're worrying about that and getting yourself all stressed out, and then another stack hits you. And some people, this is where depression comes from. People feel like life has just beaten the shit out of them while they're on the ground, and they can't see that their reaction to the real objective hits they're taking is actually doubling or tripling the amount of stress they could be enduring. If they dealt with what was happening in a healthy way, they'd have still some problems, but minimal level. I think a lot of people dream of having no problems, so they procrastinate and hesitate on dealing with problems properly. And so actually cause more problems. Sometimes you got to accept I'm going to have a certain amount of difficulty in my life. If I can't be okay with that, I'm not going to deal with it properly. And of course, there's people who just have a pessimistic view. There's a chicken and egg situation. Was it because you got stressed or you stressed because of the view? Doesn't really matter. But they actually take everything that's happened and then give a negative narrative to it to spin it as even worse than it is. Let's say you live in a Western country, a civilized, like developed country, and you know people who like talk about their life as if they've got a really bad luck, as if things are really hard for them. And I always just try to think of like right now there's more slaves in the world now than there's ever been in human history before, right? And I just imagine what those slaves would think if they heard you, like, oh, I can't believe Netflix canceled even though I gave them the right credit card information. This is bullshit. And you've got some like slave in the coltan mines in the Congo who works for like $1 a month, and three of his best friends just got whipped to death in front of him. He's like, "Oh, your Netflix isn't working. Yeah, poor thing," right? So people do this thing where they've got such a skewed perspective on comparative reality. They think that their situation's actually bad, objectively, when really most of us are doing better than, like I always say in my content, if you've got the technology to be listening to me and you've got the time out of your day to do a podcast, you're crushing it comparative to other people. In fact, if you're in the poorest of people living today, you're still doing better than the Egyptian pharaohs were doing. Like the whole of humanity has risen up so much over the last couple of thousand years. So for you to tell yourself that you've got a bad life requires really painting fairly neutral events as negative. The cereal in your box is a bit stale. No, you've got food. That's it, period. There's a leak in my roof. You mean that roof you've got? What are you talking about? So this is what people do. They compound their stress by telling themselves that life's even worse than what is objectively happening. And of course, this comes from comparing to others. If you want to get stressed, just compare yourself to others. Problem solved. You'll be stressed right away. Or compare yourself to your former self who was younger. Isn't it funny we do that quite often physically? It's like, I used to be able to do this. It's like, yeah, you were younger. You had more energy. What are you fucking talking about? Why would you be able to do that now? You're older now. We do the same way we compare ourselves to others who we see as better than us. We don't compare ourselves to people doing worse. Don't know why we skew ourselves that way, but we do. Or we look at a time, we cherry pick a time in our past that we think we were doing better, and we say, I should be able to do that now, even though I'm a different person now, and therefore I'm a failure. And we just cherry pick comparisons that make us look like a loser and a failure. And then we wonder why we're stressed all the time. Or perhaps you follow rules and virtues that somebody else wrote that conflict with your actual, real, authentic values and principles. I mean, I see people do this all the time. It's very stressful. It creates cognitive dissonance to follow rules that you don't believe in or to do behaviors that you feel guilty about. And people do this all the time, right? There are plenty of people who live by religious commandments or even secular laws that they don't agree with, and it creates a dissonance, like an authenticity gap, a difference between who you know you should be and who you're actually being. So there's probably lots of other causes of stress. There's more baseline stuff like genetic problems, childhood trauma, brain damage. But what we can see is there's generally this overall focus on trying to control something that we can't or shouldn't try to control, holding ourselves to a standard that's imaginary rather than realistic, and just compounding these two things against each other, and then coping with that stress in a way that actually just aggravates it. So coming back to the idea of being kind to yourself and loving yourself, all of these behaviors could be seen as bullying, torture, poor treatment, if nothing else. This is not what you do to someone if you really love them. You wouldn't hold them to a standard that they can't reach. And you wouldn't ask them to do something that they're not capable of. You wouldn't discourage them if they failed, right? So if you're doing this to yourself, you're not being loving to yourself. And what's the point in not being loving to yourself? You think it's motivational? Where's your evidence for that? Or just because you've always been doing it? Come on. You could always have cancer. It doesn't mean cancer is the reason you're succeeding. Thank you for showing an interest in the Nice Guy Brotherhood, a group coaching community program for nice guys and people pleasers who want to become more confident and assertive to do better in their relationships and their careers. This is also for any man who wants to become more masculine, more bold, more honest, and more authentic. So in this program, we focus in on a lot of the people pleaser and approval seeking tendencies that hold men back from achieving full self-confidence and healthy relationships. Things like avoiding conflict, trying to fix other people's emotions, molding yourself to other people's preferences, failing to stand up for yourself, not going for what you really want, and not knowing who you really are. The goal, through the support of myself and the other members of the community, is to help you build the backbone to stand up for yourself, to stop caring what other people think of you, to stop getting lost in your thoughts and your feelings, and learn how to act decisively based on your own set of core values rather than what everybody else wants you to do. So we're looking to replace things like conflict avoidance and procrastination and trying to please others with going for what you really want based on who you really are. So we address all these issues through a number of methods. Firstly, we get together each week for a group session. Now, part of that is what's called hot seat coaching, which is somebody gets on the mic with me and we do a coaching session in front of the others, and everybody gives their feedback and support, and we can deal with specific issues that's coming up for that person in their life in relation to building confidence and overcoming nice guy syndrome. We also have group discussions during these calls. We share links and resources, feedback, questions, and everything we can do to support each other's growth. And then also, alongside these group calls, you get access to my full online library of self-development courses, which includes things like building rapport, setting boundaries, and learning to confront your fears. Now, if you're interested in the group, we have a deal where you get your first month for just $1 so that you can try it before you buy it and get a sense if it's really right for you and if these are the people that are going to help you achieve your goals. Once your first month is up, if you want to continue, then we have a monthly membership subscription. It's $250 US per month for full access to everything. This includes the entire archive of recordings from all the calls that we've had so far. And if you come along with a friend, both of you will get a 50% discount for joining together. There's what we call a zero risk guarantee. If at any time you're unsatisfied with the program, you can quit and you'll get your money from the last month given back to you, no questions asked. So come and check it out. If nothing else, for $1, you get access to everything for an entire month. No risk. I'll even return that dollar if you're not satisfied, because that's how confident I am that this program is going to change your life. And so at this point, I want to segue into this idea of anxiety versus nervousness. It's an idea I've been playing with as a mental experiment lately. Somebody, I can't remember their name, they said there's really only 4 emotions: mad, sad, glad, and afraid. And all the rest are just variations of that. And I tend to agree. And anxiety and nervousness are both just elements of fear. Right? They're just somewhere on the fear spectrum. There's words we give to different elements of fear. And I realized there's key differences, or at least in my definition of these words. And one of them leads to stress and the other one doesn't. Nervousness does not cause stress, but anxiety does. Anxiety and nervousness are different in 2 distinct ways. One is temporal, what's happening versus what is going to happen or maybe going to happen. And the other is control, like how much you can do about it. Now, anxiety is almost always about something that is not yet happening, and or you can't do shit about it anyway, or at least focusing on the bits you can't control. So if I'm anxious about something, I can't point to it. It isn't happening yet. It's not there or there or there. It's just in my head. I'm imagining it. It might sound reasonable. It might seem like a really logical prediction, but it is not happening. It does not exist anywhere but in my mind presently. Whereas nervousness, like I'm either doing it or about to do it. It's like right there. So if I'm nervous about going on stage, the stage is there, the audience is there, my name's up on the fucking call sheet, and I'm next, right? That's nervous. I'm not imagining shit, right? If anything, I'm just imagining the few steps I'm about to take onto the stage, but they're definitely going to happen. So this is real. Whereas if it was 2 nights ago and I'm lying awake, worried about stage fright and worried about people judging me, there is no stage, there is no people. What am I talking about? It's all in my head, right? That's anxiety. Now, nervousness is also about focus on what I control. So maybe I'm nervous about what I'm going to say in my speech. That would be nervousness. Like, am I going to get the words right? Am I going to get my point across? Am I going to sound reasonably believable? That's nervousness. Anxiety would be like, are they going to judge me? Are they going to like me? Like a few hundred people? No, you can't control that, right? Your best performance will still piss off somebody in that crowd, right? Like you're worried about something you can't do anything about. You can't get your hands around it. So anxiety will lead to stress because, again, it's just a fixation on what you can't control. You either can't control it because it's not happening, or you can't control it because it's too big, or something like that. Whereas nervousness is you've fixated, you're afraid, but you've got a face to your enemy. You can deal with this. It's something that you can control and is happening now. Right? There's nothing wrong with being nervous. Nervous doesn't stress you out. In fact, it tends to exhilarate you. If you really think about it, being nervous is just a feeling of being very alive. It's very easy to enjoy being nervous. Bungee jumping, performing on stage, asking out your crush. If you're focused on the right things, that can be a really enjoyable like thrill. Whereas anxiety, there's nothing to enjoy in anxiety, is there? You're just panicking about something that isn't happening and doesn't exist and probably will never happen. And even if it does, it's not going to happen the way you think it's going to, or anywhere near as bad as you think it's going to. And even if that does happen, you still can't do fuck all about it. So what are you thinking about? What are you worried about? Nothing. Just a movie you're playing in your head. And that leads to stress. And people who catastrophize and get anxious a lot tend to be very high stress, don't they? So one way to look at it is that allowing yourself to bathe in anxiety, which is a choice, is a form of self-punishment, isn't it? If you could choose to go and be nervous instead, go find something you can control that is happening right now and deal with that, and that is a choice available to you at all given times, then that would actually be an act of self-love. I think of it kind of like a metaphor where anxiety is like being dragged down a river, a wild, raging river. There's nothing you can do about it except cough and splutter and half drown and just worry about being in the river. There's nothing you can do except one thing is you can paddle slowly over to the side of the river and get out. And this does not mean get to a place where there's no fear, but go find something you can control. Go find something you can do something about. Right? How many people lie awake worrying about the climate and they've got emails they haven't answered? The emails are right there. Go answer the fucking email. But you'd rather imagine dealing with an impossible problem, which is like whipping yourself on the back. That's not an act of self-love. Whereas actually answering the email would be, even though it makes you nervous. If you're okay with being nervous, if you understand nervous is a massive upgrade on anxious, and that nervous is perfectly fine, that nervous is often the bridge between here and being satisfied with your behavior, then choose nervousness over anxiety by finding something smaller that you can control, that you've been putting off. Another element of the stress, which also leads to being unloving to yourself, is not seeing the truth of the way we're all living. Now, this might not apply to every single corner of the earth. Maybe there are some tribes living in the Brazilian forests who have got it right, but most of the rest of us live in a society and an environment that is a serious mismatch for our brains. It is actually weird to not be depressed and burned out in this way that we live. I mean, you think of a 9 to 5 job or primary school or high school. Those are such fucked up environments for the human brain. You put a monkey in one of those, a primate, in one of those situations where they have to sit still for 9 to 5 being lectured at or doing a repetitive, meaningless job over and over again, that monkey's going to go insane. It's not going to be a happy monkey. Well, we're fucking monkeys, mate, and we're not happy with it. Where there's always concrete under our feet, there's always fumes in the air we breathe, there's always people telling us what to do, Our tribe is so big that most of them are just a faceless mass of people who are a potential threat. Like our brains aren't wired for that. So you got to like step back and understand that you're in a situation that objectively is bad for you. And you've got to do what you can about that if you want to love yourself. But also like there's a reason that life feels meaningless or exhausting or that you're unproductive or that you're fixated on money instead of just directly enjoying life. Been trained and conditioned to join this machine that does not suit the human psyche at all. Go ahead, find me a scientific study that says this way of living is good for us. Go ahead. In school, you're trained to obey rules and authority, even if you disagree with them, even if you have misgivings, even if you don't like what's being done. Why? Why should we have to do that? So when we become adults that do it. Most of us are living most of our time looking at a computer screen. Our brains aren't built for that. Our optic system isn't built for that much stimulation, for that much light, right? For that much information to just barrage our brain. We're not built for that. No contact with nature. When's the last time you held wood from a tree in your hands? When's the last time your feet dug into the dirt? That's what we're built for. I'm not being a fucking hippie here. I'm saying wearing shoes and walking on concrete and touching nothing but plastic. We're not built for that, right? No wonder we're fucking stressed. And worst of all, I think, is our disconnection socially. And this is a rather recent development. Social media, the big COVID wipeout. Love is probably the easiest thing to reduce stress. Love between people. Hugging friends, releases oxytocin. There's all sorts of studies and evidence that being connected with others cures loneliness, another major source of stress. And yet most of our connection now is with data on a screen, pretending to be a person. Fuck, it won't be long before we won't even know if it's a real person or not. How often are you hugging people? How often are you talking to them face to face? How often are you just spending time chilling with someone? Shit, even if you are going to watch a screen, have you got your arm around someone while you're doing it? As I mentioned before, following other people's rules instead of developing your own philosophy and your own values. Do you think you're going to find a meaningful, enjoyable life doing what some other guru thinks is the right way? Like most of the people who came up with these rules are fucking psychos, right? And you're just doing what they said. I always find it weird that we're born into laws. That one, I actually agree with most laws most of the time. I'm like, yeah, fair enough. People get hurt if you don't do that. But no point was I asked, I was born into it. Like, you can prosecute a 9-year-old for shoplifting. It's like, he's not even old enough to discuss what law means, and he's already in trouble for them. It's like, you're born into a world where somebody else made up the rules and you got to follow them right from day dot. You don't even get a chance to, like, okay, take a week, read it all, let us know if you agree with it or not. And that's just the like secular laws of the country. What about the cultural laws of your family or the religious laws that your society follows or whatever? Like you're just barraged with other people's ideas about right and wrong. When's the last time you figured it out for yourself and lived by it? And all of this, of course, leads us to the porn and the drugs and the gambling and the video games and all the other things we do to just try and decompress from this overstimulation and this boredom and so on. And so we actually fail to process normal human emotion, which again stresses us out. And it's again something we wouldn't do to someone we loved. We wouldn't say, don't process your emotions, right? We'd give them time and space to figure things out if you were truly compassionate towards them. Do you do that to yourself? Because you don't do that with video games. You don't do it with porn. You do it with sitting still or journaling or going for a nice walk. Do you actually give yourself a chance to fucking process this nightmare that we're living in? Right? Even if you can't get out, can you at least process it and sort of find some wiggle room? Run alongside the cart. Are you a nice guy or people pleaser who wishes they were more assertive, more honest, and better respected by others? Since 2013, I've been helping people just like you discover their integrity and apply it courageously to build deep and meaningful connections, get respected by others, and become the confident person you've always wanted to be. Being able to speak your mind without worrying what other people will think or worrying that it's the right thing to say, and being able to assertively stand up for yourself and your loved ones. Imagine never feeling the need to apologize for who you are or what you want, and being able to live carefree without shame or the I'm not good enough story in your head. Imagine going to bed knowing that you courageously took every opportunity available to you and you've got no regrets because you always know what you should be doing in every situation. I'm so confident in my ability to help people like you unleash your highest level of self-worth that I give people a free coaching session to test what I'm doing. In this 1 hour session, we will uncover the biggest barrier to your confidence, whether it's an awareness problem, you don't know what you should be doing differently, or it's a courage problem, you know what you should be doing, but you find it too intimidating. I will guide you to make a breakthrough with your behavior to get through that barrier in a powerful way without feeling terrified and without destroying everything you love. I've had some people find this first session so powerful that I never hear from them again simply because they didn't need anything more after that. It launched them into the highest level of confidence that they've ever experienced. And if that's the result you get, I'm good with that. One client put it, this session was more valuable to me than 3 years of therapy combined. So if you're tired of trying to keep everybody happy and you're sick of worrying what other people think of you and you're concerned that your people pleasing and conflict avoidance is going to damage your relationships, then come and have a talk with me. Worst case scenario, you get to experience what it's like to talk with someone who actually understands what it's like to be you. I've lived the nice guy experience for decades. I know it inside and out. I know that pain. Case scenario, and very likely, you will have such a powerful insight into a behavioral change that you can make in the next 24 hours to significantly improve your confidence, relationships, and career. All I ask is that you be honest, open to change, and willing to try something new. Why wait another 10 years to discover confidence when you can do it today? Fill out the brief form below to apply for a trial coaching session. Do this quickly because there are limited spots each month, and then I'll get back to you to book in a time to talk. And moving from the external to the internal, let's talk about pressure. Pressure is, I've got to do more than this. Never good enough. And what's interesting is pressure is often credited for people's success. People think that pressure helps. Everyone I've talked to puts a lot of pressure on themselves, argues that it's a motivational sense for them, that it does something to inspire them or move them, that they often say that if I didn't put pressure on myself, I'd just sit on the couch all day, blah, blah, blah. Never tested it, of course. But it's like you've got somebody walking beside you giving you shit your whole life. And so whenever you succeed, you figure, oh, it must be because of them, because they're always there. But correlation does not equal causation. Like I said before, just because you got cancer doesn't mean you give it credit for anything you achieve while you've got cancer. That should be obvious, right? It's a tumor, it's actually in the way. You'd probably achieve more without it. You've got a sense of that when you're sick, don't you? You don't give it credit to your sickness. Well, what if pressure is sickness? What if you could do even better without it? Have you ever considered that? Even if you're a high performer, and I think this is why high performers really struggle with the idea that pressure is not helpful, is they're usually outperforming everyone around them. It's like, yeah, but that's still not the top of your potential. But you always ask more from yourself. You always feel like you failed, feel like it wasn't good enough. You always say, yeah, but whenever you get a compliment or whenever you win. Giving credit to pressure is like assuming you perform better when you've got a brain tumor. Kids. You ever watch kids, how they're self-motivated without pressure? I mean, you got to get them pretty young because most parents start putting pressure on them quite early, but you get in young enough and you'll see that the kid keeps busy all day long with lots of fun stuff to do, never getting bored, never stressing out, never lying around doing nothing, and yet no pressure. Why do you need pressure? If kids don't need it, why do adults need it? You think you lost that, do you? Do you think that like motivation that naturally comes, the exuberance of being a kid, that wore off and now you got to pressure yourself to do stuff? Well, which came first? Losing that vibe or the pressure? I'd suggest the pressure came first. Remember school? Do you have any memory of when the pressure first started? Maybe it started earlier for you. Maybe your parents put pressure on you. Were you getting dragged to like all these after school activities? Were you being forced to do piano lessons? Were you being told to clean up all the time and so on? Like, do you feel like you're forced to do stuff? Is that maybe why you lost motivation? And now being forced is the only way you get things done? What is pressure? It's resistance, isn't it? To push on something is to resist. So why would we think pressure helps us move? I mean, you put pressure on an electric system, like the amps go down, I think, right? Like you put pressure on any system, the performance drops. It doesn't increase. Right? If water's flowing and I build a dam, less water flows. The water goes still and just squeezes out this little hole in this like sort of high pressure stream that just does damage. I should just leave the river the fuck alone. It will flow just nicely, won't it? It'll keep flowing to the end of fucking time if I leave it alone. Now, I'm not going to bother citing my sources here, but ChatGPT or Google will help you find them. But studies generally show that people who are relaxed, having fun, are better problem solvers, more productive, higher performing. But I've tested this on myself. I get way more done when I don't try to get things done. It makes no sense in my brain until I do it. And I realize that I've been conned. I've been conditioned into believing that pressure is helpful, and yet it so obviously is not. Like, there's no way you'd choose a brain tumor over not having a brain tumor, right? Well, why would you choose pressure over free flowing if you want high performance? It doesn't make sense. So pressure is a liar. All it does is stress us out. It undermines our successes, it emphasizes our failures. It asks us to do more than is necessary. It asks us to control things that we can't or shouldn't control. And none of this is being kind to yourself. Now, Dr. Robert Glover says the opposite of crazy is still crazy. And this is a really helpful thing to keep in mind when you're getting into self-development, that the extreme other end of the spectrum that you're on is probably just as harmful as the one that you're in. People think the opposite to stress and pressure is often just giving up completely. Whenever I'm arguing or debating with a high performer about taking it easy on themselves, they're always like, what, should I just give up completely? They just do this big extreme, like opposite end of the spectrum. But if I don't put pressure on myself, I'm just gonna sit around smoking drugs and get nothing done and fucking die, blah. It's like, no, that's just as crazy, obviously. Crashing on the couch and binge watching Netflix is not good for you. No, that's not a healthy response to pressure and stress. You're right. But that's a false dichotomy that those are the only two options, high pressure or low performance. It's not being kind to yourself to crash and burn and engage in coping mechanisms. If anything, that's just a cop out. One thing you got to keep in mind, there's always a healthy option, always, or a healthier option, or the healthiest option available. There's always that. So if you're not taking that, then you're stuck in the false dichotomy. And somebody's like, I can't stick with my diet, so fuck it, I'll just have like ice cream and pizza. So is there maybe a third thing you could eat, right? So I've been working too hard, I'm quitting this job. You couldn't just like reduce your hours, maybe, sustainably? Like the opposite of pressure is still harmful. One way to look at it is fight and flight response. High pressure is a fight response. Zero effort is a flight response, running away. But both of them are just fear responses. Both of them are just knee-jerk reactions to like panic and fear and stress. What about sustainable middle ground? What about getting off the fucking roller coaster and cruising? No highs, no lows, just sustainable, constant growth. What if that's an available option? Why are you not looking for that option? Why are you stuck in that false dichotomy of just high and low? Because it's not even middle. It's not staying on that spectrum at all of pressure to giving up. It's getting off that spectrum, off that fucking roller coaster, and getting in a car and driving down the freeway instead. It's not even, you're not even on the ride. You're thinking completely differently. You got to think about getting off the pressure to give up stress spectrum and start thinking about kindness, which is different. It's really fucking different. It's a complete paradigm shift. For people like us, it's like alien. We can't understand it in our current mental framework because it doesn't fit in. Like I said, if I talk to a high performer, they just think I'm talking about giving up completely because that's the closest they can come to interpreting what kindness means or self-love might mean. Or they think it's, oh, I've got to pressure myself to do very healthy things. I've got to make myself get lots of sleep and make myself exercise and make myself talk to that girl. So no, you're just processing it through the old model. You're not actually interpreting what it means correctly. Some of you have never experienced self-kindness, or it's been so long that you've forgotten. Last time was when you were a toddler, maybe. And since then, you've just been hard on yourself. You don't have a frame of reference, and I understand that. And that's kind of what it was for me. I felt like I was learning a new language that didn't even follow the same basic grammatical structure as the old language. Like I had nothing to reference, just starting with like this blank slate. But that's what I'm saying is you can't reference the old way. This is not about pressure. It's not about giving up. It's this third thing that you've probably never done before that won't make sense to you at first. So in kindness, there is performance, but without pressure. There's rest and recovery, but without crashing or inactivity. That you can go from like moving to slowing down, run with the cart at the pace that it's going, never stop going with the cart, but never ask more from yourself than what you can do as you are tied to this cart. So you got to let go of the idea of just tuning the dials you've already been using and just take on a completely different approach. Like I said, it's the same approach if you have that double standard that you would apply to someone who's not you, who you care about, right? What we're talking about is turning off that double standard. Thank you for showing an interest in the Nice Guy Brotherhood, a group coaching community program for nice guys and people pleasers who want to become more confident and assertive to do better in their relationships and their careers. This is also for any man who wants to become more masculine, more bold, more honest, and more authentic. So in this program, we focus in on a lot of the people pleaser and approval seeking tendencies that hold men back from achieving full self-confidence and healthy relationships. Things like avoiding conflict, trying to fix other people's emotions, molding yourself to other people's preferences, failing to stand up for yourself, not going for what you really want, and not knowing who you really are. The goal, through the support of myself and the other members of the community, is to help you build the backbone to stand up for yourself, to stop caring what other people think of you, to stop getting lost in your thoughts and your feelings, and learn how to act decisively based on your own set of core values rather than what everybody else wants you to do. So we're looking to replace things like conflict avoidance and procrastination and trying to please others with going for what you really want based on who you really are. So we address all these issues through a number of methods. Firstly, we get together each week for a group session. Now, part of that is what's called hot seat coaching, which is somebody gets on the mic with me and we do a coaching session in front of the others, and everybody gives their feedback and support, and we can deal with specific issues that's coming up for that person in their life in relation to building confidence and overcoming nice guy syndrome. We also have group discussions during these calls. We share links and resources, feedback, questions, and everything we can do to support each other's growth. And then also, alongside these group calls, you get access to my full online library of self-development courses, which includes things like building rapport, setting boundaries, and learning to confront your fears. Now, if you're interested in the group, we have a deal where you get your first month for just $1 so that you can try it before you buy it and get a sense if it's really right for you and if these are the people that are going to help you achieve your goals. Once your first month is up, if you want to continue, then we have a monthly membership subscription. It's $250 US per month for full access to everything. This includes the entire archive of recordings from all the calls that we've had so far. And if you come along with a friend, both of you will get a 50% discount for joining together. There's what we call a zero risk guarantee. If at any time you're unsatisfied with the program, you can quit and you'll get your money from the last month given back to you, no questions asked. So come and check it out. If nothing else, for $1, you get access to everything for an entire month. No risk. I'll even return that dollar if you're not satisfied, because that's how confident I am that this program is going to change your life. So enough foreplay. Let's talk about the practical. What does it mean to be kind to yourself in terms of behavior, thought patterns, etc.? You can figure it out for yourself. Like I said, start with the external. What would it mean to be kind to others? And you might even want to pause at this point, get a piece of paper out, do a little brainstorm. If you're being kind to other people, loving towards other people, bullet points, what kind of things would I witness you doing? What kind of things would you say? How would you react to their struggles? What would you do when they're down? What would you do when they're up? What would you call their attempts at doing things? What would look like encouragement? What would look like love, right? When's the last time you were loving towards someone? What did you do and why? Because your code is in there if you've at least done it to somebody else in your life. But even if you haven't, you can start asking yourself some questions to just rethink what loving someone looks like. Okay, so take a common scenario. Let's say a friend of yours is struggling to achieve a goal that's clearly beyond their current capability, and they're being hard on themselves about the failure. Say a friend comes home from the gym, and you're like, "How was the workout?" He's like, "Ah, fucking sucked, man. I went there. I was like, I've got to do 10 pull-ups today because I did 10 last week, and I tried my best, but I only did 7. I'm such a weak cunt, right? Imagine you're in that situation. And now I want you to think, what would kindness to that person look like right here, right now? Would you pressure them to work harder? Would you scold them for their failures? Would you agree with them? Like, yeah, you should have done more, you weak fuck. Is that kindness? Or would you tell them to give up on everything? Just, yeah, exercise isn't for you, mate. Just here's some drugs, give up, crash on the couch. Is that what you'd do? Would you advise them to keep on pushing to do something that's clearly unsustainable and, keep doing the thing that obviously makes them miserable? Would you encourage them to keep doing it? Would you give them drugs, take their mind off it, introduce them to gambling? Maybe you would do these things because you don't understand kindness. But here's what a kind person is likely to do: remind them of how well they're doing, to remind them that survival is an achievement. Everyone dies eventually, so if you're still going, you're on top of things. That you've become complacent about all the things you achieve because you usually achieve them. Right? You think having a shower is no big deal. Try being a homeless drug addict. Having a shower is a big deal. It really is. You're exercising at all is amazing. That you managed to do whatever's required to put food on the table for one more day. That you tolerated this nightmare of a world we live in for another few hours. You got through it and didn't top yourself. This is actually an achievement. You're actually well on top of things. Going to the gym and doing 10 pull-ups is icing on the cake. The fact that you've got yourself to a situation where you could even go to a gym is amazing. Right? Have you forgotten that? So a kind person reminds you that you actually are already doing really well. There's no pressure required here. You're on top of things. You tease out their narrative. Maybe get them to compare that with evidence. A lot of people like to sell themselves a story about how badly they're doing, but it doesn't line up with evidence. Somebody says, I'm broke. You go, well, how much money do you actually have? How come you got a roof over your head? How come there's food in the fridge? What do you mean by broke? So kindness isn't necessarily like, oh, poor you. That's pity. Kindness is reminding people and sometimes challenging them about the facts of life, that actually they're doing all right. Somebody's like, oh, I'm a fucking loser. Well, then how are you still here? How have you been going all these years if you're not a winner? A loser wouldn't be here. I don't mean to undermine anyone who's passed, but one of the things I always keep in mind, and some of you will be intimately familiar with this, is that suicide is an option. And I'm not recommending it. But if you haven't taken that option despite being aware that it's available, then you're a fighter. Because it's a tempting fucking option. It really is. Like, you didn't choose to be born. Seems kind of unfair to be dumped in this shithole that somebody else wrote. So if you're like, no, no, I'll stick it out one more day. I'll try and get through it. That's quite courageous, right? I've got nothing but sympathy for suicide victims. Like, I get it. I get giving up, right? There's a lot of reason to give up, which means the people who don't are incredibly courageous. So somebody says like, "Oh, I suck," or "Life's terrible," or whatever. It's like, well, that only emphasizes how well you're doing. If you think life's terrible and you're still going, fucking bravo. It's easy to carry on when life's easy. You're carrying on when life's hard. Why wouldn't you pat yourself on the back for that? Somebody says, I have bad luck. It's like, really, every minute of the day? Which minutes exactly did bad luck things happen? An example, I got a client recently who's had a number of bereavements in one year. It is an average of like one a month for 6 months or something, which is pretty rough. And I'm sure the sense of grief was non-stop almost throughout that 6 months, but those people actually only died on one day. I hate to sound kind of callous about it, but that means out of 6 months, 5 days had bereavements. The rest of the time, nobody died. Is that not good luck? Have we forgotten the normal human state? Like 1,000 years ago, half your family died before the age of 5. Like that was normal. If you're only having one bereavement a month, that means you're having 29 days of non-death per month. So how bad is your luck really? If you're having 29 bereavements a month, yeah, you got bad luck. It's another thing. Like if you're sad from 6 people dying, you knew 6 people well enough to be sad? Good for you socially. There are people out there who's got no funerals to go to. There's no one they're that close to. That's not to sort of make you feel guilty that you feel bad, but just to make sure you're not adding to the story about what's actually happening. One of the ones I've been battling with lately, trying to be challenging in a loving way to myself, is the story that I don't get enough sleep. I've been sort of sleep deprived since my daughter was born. Pretty much every night she'll wake me up 2 or 3 times a night. But look at me doing this podcast. I mean, how sleep deprived am I, really? I'm not in hospital, so I'm not that sleep deprived. I don't seem to be having any major illnesses or injuries that directly result from sleep deprivation. I'm still able to get shit done, mostly, to a survivable, we get through to the next day standard. So is the narrative that I'm not getting enough sleep accurate? Or is it more like I wish I had more sleep? Do I even actually need that much sleep? Is that proven? I mean, I'm tired, but maybe I'm tired because I tell myself I'm tired. So kindness isn't letting me indulge in a story that might not be true, that isn't backed by the evidence, and is fact actually a compliment. Look how much I do despite being tired. That's the truth. That's what I should be telling myself if I want to be accurate and kind. I mean, I used to work with criminal offenders, and many of them were drug addicts, and it'd be just amazing if some of them managed to come and see me on the right day, forget the right time, right week, shit. I mean, for them in their situation, homeless, drug addicted, all their friends are gang members, they've got pending court cases, and they remember to come and have their interview with me. That's kind of amazing, right? I'm not sure I'd remember to do that with that kind of shit going on. So are they really like a loser, or are they kind of incredible, kind of amazing that they can get something so basic done in such a chaotic storm? And when you're kind to people, you help them see when they're being hard on themselves, when they're asking too much. You point out that if they're stressed, then they must be asking too much from themselves, or otherwise they wouldn't be stressed. That if they're like, oh man, I didn't get any shit done today, then whatever they're asking themselves to get done was too much, or otherwise they would have got done. Like, if you're asking yourself to do the right amount, you'd be like, fuck, I crushed it today, every single day. Right? That would be the exact right amount to ask from yourself. It's like, man, I ran out of shit to do at like 3 p.m., like another day. But that list is completely arbitrary. You decide how much stuff is on that list of things you've got to do. So if you get to the end of the day and the list is undone, you made the list too big. You did, not life, you. Guarantee you 99% of things on the list were not required for your survival today. So that means they're optional extras. You asking yourself to do more optional extras than you can handle doing is unkind. Whatever you did is the limit. Try the reverse. Write yourself a to-do list that's done by 11 and then make it you can spontaneously do optional things after. If you're like, oh my God, I could never cut the list down that much. You're lying to yourself. Tell you what, get a highlighter out, take your list, highlight all the things that if you don't do them, somebody dies today. Anything that's not highlighted doesn't have to be done. Period. You're lying to yourself if you say it does. Just remember, if you're doing things in a healthy way, you wouldn't be stressed. So if you're feeling stressed, you're doing it wrong. Don't pressure yourself to keep doing it wrong. Figure out how to do it right. Call out the false dichotomies, right? If you've been kind to someone and they're stuck in it's either this or that and they're both terrible options, go, is there maybe a third option that you just can't see right now because you're stressed? Because there's never only two options. I think unless you're about to receive an execution where you can either they say, what final words have you got? Oh, even then, there's so many different things you could say. Well, let's say someone's got a gun to your head and they're about to pull the trigger, and you can either like look them in the eyes or close your eyes. That's a situation where you really only got two options. Even as I say that, I think there's other things you could do. But I guarantee you, I'll put it out there as a challenge. You give me an example of a situation where you've only got two options, and I will come up with a third. Guaranteed. So when you tell yourself you only got two options and they're both terrible options, you are lying to yourself. You're being unkind to yourself. Ask yourself, well, if both of these suck, what's the third one? Or if there is a range of options, I could see them all, but they all suck. Well, which one sucks the least for the long term? Okay, go ahead with that one then. Stop waiting around for a good option. Sometimes that's what kindness is about. It's about gently helping someone see that there's no good option on the table. Because life doesn't always have good options. But it always has a range of best to worst. And the quicker you act, usually, thoughtfully, the more options you've keep on the table. So you can grab the best option quickly if you're not hanging around waiting for a better one. But if you hang around going, oh, these are all uncomfortable, I'll just wait. Well, then the best one's usually the first one off the table. That opportunity's gone. Then the next one. Then you're left with the dog shit ones, right? And challenge your ego attachment to suffering, to martyrdom, to being the poor underdog who has bad luck, the paranoid loser who's been targeted by the universe, who life is unfair. It's not kindness to attach to that identity. When I tell myself I'm the guy who doesn't get any sleep, that doesn't benefit my life. It's not even true. I'm a loser and nobody loves me. I've coached some of the people, I've coached people who've got the worst social lives you could imagine. They've always got someone who loves them. Always at least one person, if nothing else, me. I'm loving towards them. You attach to these stories about yourself being worse than you actually are. And kindness is about letting go of that attachment. Like, oh, maybe I'm actually just a normal human being. Maybe I'm not this special, negatively special person. Maybe I'm just regular primate struggling with life. Can I just be middle of the pack? Can I just be a regular person? Is that okay? Can I let go of being something special and just blend into the other grains of sand on the beach and just deal with life? Get coaching and support. Why are you doing this on your own? Independence, self-made man, whatever. That's a trauma coping mechanism. Healthy people always go and get support. Healthy people are resourceful. Confident people work with others, they cooperate, collaborate. They do what's best for getting the job done, not what is the only way they can do it on their own. So if you're struggling, get support. Ask for help. It's one of the hardest things in the world for me to do is ask for help. I recently just sort of brought on two people in my work, one to help me with creative admin, one to help me with sales. It took me months to like work myself up to actually ask them. Then afterwards, I'm like, why didn't I do this earlier? This makes my life so much better, and it makes their life better. The fuck was I waiting for, right? Every time I've hired a coach or seen a therapist or asked my wife for advice, it hasn't always been that I went with what they said or anything, but it's always been helpful to include other people. If nothing else, just to validate my own ideas. And come back to the basics. Stress is being here when you want to be there. So kindness is getting okay with here. Base your decisions on what is your current level of fitness, your current level of mental strength, your current financial situation, your current social situation, your current logistical location. Instead of wishing you were somewhere else or a you version from the past or somebody else, like deal with what you are. So you bench pressed 100 kgs last week, but you've got a shoulder injury now. So now you're a guy with a shoulder injury. You're not that guy who did 100. He didn't have a shoulder injury. So this guy's just going to do push-ups because he doesn't want to fuck up his injury. So going, oh, I wish I could still bench. No, only guys without shoulder injuries can bench. You're a shoulder injury guy. Forget it. It's over. Push-ups or nothing. Squats. Oh, I wish I had more money. Well, you don't. You don't have more money. Go look at your bank account. That's how much money you have. Do a budget based on that. Make financial decisions based on that. Yeah, you could afford lattes and stuff last month. You can't this month. Goodbye, lattes. So be it. Kindness is working with what is resourceful, present, realistic. Stop dreaming about something that isn't happening because it just bums you in. And just do all of this one small step at a time. In the end, we're all just living until we don't anymore. There's no destination to get to, there's just staying alive. Right? That's hard enough. You don't need to ask more of yourself from that. So what's the next best move I can do with where I'm at that is, within my capability, which is something I can control, do something about, meaningful, aligned with my values? I'll just do that. And then after that's done, I'll do the next one until I die. Thank you so much for watching, listening. I'll see you next time. Are you a nice guy or people pleaser who wishes they were more assertive, more honest, and better respected by others? Since 2013, I've been helping people just like you discover their integrity and apply it courageously to build deep and meaningful connections, get respected by others, and become the confident person you've always wanted to be. Imagine being able to speak your mind without worrying what other people will think or worrying that it's the right thing to say, and being able to assertively stand up for yourself and your loved ones. Imagine never feeling the need to apologize for who you are or what you want, and being able to live carefree without shame or the I'm not good enough story in your head. Imagine going to bed knowing that you courageously took every opportunity available to you and you've got no regrets because you always know what you should be doing in every situation. I'm so confident in my ability to help people like you unleash your highest level of self worth that I give people a free coaching session to test what I'm doing. In this 1 hour session, we will uncover the biggest barrier to your confidence, whether it's an awareness problem, you don't know what you should be doing differently, or it's a courage problem, you know what you should be doing, but you find it too intimidating. I will guide you to make a breakthrough with your behavior to get through that barrier in a powerful way without feeling terrified and without destroying everything you love. I've had some people find this first session so powerful that I never hear from them again simply because they didn't need anything more after that. It launched them into the highest level of confidence that they've ever experienced. And if that's the result you get, I'm good with that. One client put it, this session was more valuable to me than 3 years of therapy combined. So if you're tired of trying to keep everybody happy and you're sick of worrying what other people think of you, and you're concerned that your people pleasing and conflict avoidance is going to damage your relationships, then come and have a talk with me. Worst case scenario, you get to experience what it's like to talk with someone who actually understands what it's like to be you. I've lived the nice guy experience for decades. I know it inside and out. I know that pain. Case scenario, and very likely, you will have such a powerful insight into a behavioral change that you can make in the next 24 hours to significantly improve your confidence, relationships, and career. All I ask is that you be honest, open to change, and willing to try something new. Why wait another 10 years to discover confidence when you can do it today? Fill out the brief form below to apply for a trial coaching session. Do this quickly because there are limited spots each month, and then I'll get back to you to book in a time to talk.